Okay, we're just going to get started in a few minutes. This is my first time doing a YouTube live stream with OBS software. I don't really know how it works, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I can't see the chat or anything. I can just see me. We're just going to get started in a few minutes. This is my first time. Okay, there we go. It's 4 a.m. in the morning in Toronto time. In Canada, my computer is still based on Toronto time, but where I am here, it's 10 a.m. Saturday. So welcome to the live stream. I can't see comments or anything. I don't know how to change that, but maybe in the future I'll try to change that. Welcome to the live stream. This is my first YouTube live stream using OBS, so I hope it works out. Hopefully you can see the screen here. Welcome to my channel. This is Revolutionize Education. This is a channel that I created just to make educational content. I teach a lot of classes online, and I love learning and creating content for students. So I thought I would do these live streams pretty regularly to kind of keep me motivated, keep me um, doing things and making progress. And I love National Geographic History. I use this a lot with students. So I'm going to try to do this every month where I do a live stream of one of the articles. They're great. I love the pictures. I love the information, the writing. So I will have some notes as well. There is a folder that you can go to. There should be a link in the YouTube video description. You can go into this folder, the Children's Crusade. You can get the article from National Geographic History. It's from 2020. I've cut it up and it's just a PDF you can download. And I've also made a document with some notes you can go into and check the notes as well. And if you ever want to um, download things, download a PDF and edit it and work on it and annotate it, this is a really great website that I use with everybody. It's called Drawboard. So you can get Drawboard, you can work on things, and it's just really great to do work and to annotate documents. Okay, so we're going to begin. I'm going to read through the article and then discuss it for a little bit, and that'll be it. It'll take about maybe 30 minutes, hopefully. So here we go. This is called The Children's Crusade, Mission of the Masses. And you can see here that I'm using a drawboard. I will maybe highlight and annotate some things along the way as well. And just to show you some of the functions here, we have a pen, it's very useful, and a highlighter down here. We can also add text, and we can also insert images, which is great. Okay, so the Children's Crusade, Mission of the Masses. In 2012, sorry, in 1212, not 2012, this was much earlier than that. In 1212, thousands of European youths banded together to try to take back the Holy Land from Muslim control. Unsanctioned by the Church, their holy heroism left a deep mark on the popular imagination and fascinated historians. Right. The Crusades stand as one of the key historical of the Middle Ages. Backed by the Catholic Church, European Christians launched 8 separate missions to take the Holy Land from Muslim control between 1096 and 1291. I'm just going to highlight that. Led by Europe's elite, the Crusades were documented in great detail by the leaders of the Church, as well as the people who fought them. Their leaders, their movements, and their outcomes are well known to history. The story of the Children's Crusade of 1212 brings to mind powerful images of throngs of medieval European children gathering together in faith to wrest Jerusalem from Muslims. The events of the two expeditions fascinated 13th century audiences, and chroniclers wrote different accounts decades after the Children's Crusade ended. Historians, however, are hampered by a lack of detail. Primary sources about these popular movements of the early 13th century. So it's very interesting. Um, there's not a lot of detail. There aren't primary sources. So those are the best sources, I guess, to understand something from history. The primary source, like I guess, written by the person who actually experienced it or someone close to them in that time period. And they're lacking that, so it's hard to know exactly what happened with these children's crusades. Most consider that the events recorded by later chroniclers may be legendary or exaggerated. The Children's Crusade was not an official crusade, which had to be sanctioned by a pope, nor does there exist solid evidence that it was supported predominantly by young children. Nevertheless, it was a mass movement inspired by the desire to defend and spread Christianity in the early 1200s. Early 1200s, so we're talking about the 13th century here. And I'm just going to highlight this. It had to be sanctioned by the Pope to be a real crusade. The Age of Crusades. Official papal crusades began in the 11th century. Islam had spread far and wide to formerly Christian lands in the Near East and North Africa in the 7th century, and to the Iberian Peninsula in the 8th. So the Iberian Peninsula, that's in Spain. By the late 11th century, Europe was enjoying a period of economic strength, and the papacy had asserted its power following a series of important reforms. Buoyed by a resurgence in pilgrimage across Europe, the Catholic Church wanted to expand. The blessing of Pope Urban II in 1095 launched the First Crusade, a bid to retake the Holy Land the following summer. The Christian Alliance took Jerusalem from the Fatimid Muslims in 1099 and established the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Over the next 2 centuries, 7 crusades followed in an attempt to retain control in the Holy Land. So 2 centuries, we've got 200 years, 7 crusades to have that control in what they called the Holy Land. Muslim retaliation would prove too strong, however, and the last European crusader stronghold would fall to the Mamluks in 1291. The most well-known crusades were these large expeditions to the Holy Land, but there were other military missions in Europe that roused the faithful. In the early 1200s, Pope Innocent III proclaimed 2 local European crusades. One was the struggle against Almohad Muslim rulers in Spain. The other was the campaign to destroy Catharism, a Christian heresy popular in southern France. Both these local and distant holy wars stirred up religious fervor among commoners in Europe, in turn sparking a series of popular crusades. So this is very interesting. I'm just going to pause here. I'll go to my notes shortly. There are some lectures I've been watching about the Middle Ages. It's very interesting history. And the professor talks a lot about heresies, how many heresies they were and how interesting they were. And heresy is basically you think something about God or religion that is different from what the kind of status quo is, what everyone else thinks. And so there was a heresy here in southern France near Carcassonne and Narbonne, that kind of area, um, called Catharism. They were called the Cathars. And I don't know the specifics too well, so I'm not going to try to explain it. But I'll go to my notes, I'll show you what I have, and it's very interesting. So one of the crusades was to get rid of these people, these European people in France who just believed something different about um, Christianity. So it's also a Star Wars race. Okay, interesting. From the ancient Greek, the pure ones, that's what the name meant, was a Christian quasi-dualist and pseudo-Gnostic movement which thrived in southern Europe. So the 12th and 14th centuries, and it was denounced as a heretical sect by the Catholic Church. So there was a crusade against it. It was attacked by the crusade and then by the medieval Inquisition. Around 1 million were slaughtered, hanged, or burnt at the stake. Um, so they famously believed that there were not one but two gods, the good God of heaven and the evil God of, I think, this time is what they were talking about, yeah, on the Wikipedia page. And there's a BBC Radio 4 discussion about it by some historians as well. If you want to check that out, it's in the doc. And these are the early Middle Ages lectures, which are very, very interesting if you're interested in that history. So we will continue on here. The mysterious Pueri. The Children's Crusade began in spring 1212 as the church sought recruits to fight Muslim Spain and the Cathars. But a new group of people willing to fight for God started to emerge, volunteers who were neither mercenaries or warriors. 13th century chroniclers called them pueri. Pueri is a Latin term that can mean children, generally, or boys specifically. The appearance of this word in the sources led to the popular name of the Children's Crusade, but historians are unsure that all the participants were literal children. So there we go. Oops. Okay. Existing sources have scant details, so it is not possible to establish the exact ages of all the pueri. While the youthfulness of many of those who took part was noted by chroniclers, some historians have recently suggested that pueri could have been a social designation for poor landless peasants, and their movement may have been notable for the large number of poor peasant youths. The Children's Crusade had two principal leaders, Stephen from Cloyes, a hamlet on the Loire River in central France, and Nicholas of Cologne in Germany. A shepherd, Stephen was perhaps as young as 12 in 1212, a lot of 12s here, when he rose to lead a popular religious movement. The Chronicon Universal Anonymi Laudunensi was written by an unnamed monk from Laon in northern France. So a lot of this is uh, France. Also, the other leader was from Germany, and is one of the sources historians look to when studying the Children's Crusade. The text describes Stephen in the month of June 1212. A certain Puer named Stephen, a shepherd by profession, from a village called Cloyes, I hope I'm saying that right, used to claim that the Lord appeared to him in the guise of a poor pilgrim and accepted bread from him and entrusted to him letters to be carried to the king of the Franks. Since Cloyes is in the diocese of Chartres, Stephen may have been to that cathedral city when Pope Innocent III visited to build support for the larger crusading efforts. Stephen began attracting followers to his self-proclaimed crusade. Laon's chronicle recounts that Stephen and a large band of Pueri set out for Paris to seek an audience with the French sovereign. Okay, very interesting. We've got some great pictures here that I will go through afterwards. We'll just continue here. Okay, Philip II to deliver. Yes, here we go. So set out for Paris to seek an audience with the French sovereign, Philip II, to deliver the holy letters. The king lived in the Benedictine Abbey of Saint Denis, just to the north of the city. The arrival of the shepherd boys and his followers in Paris coincided with the annual Vendite fair, attended by merchants from all over Europe. At this time of year, Paris saw a great influx of pilgrims to the Abbey of Saint Denis. Among them was Stephen. Together with shepherds of a similar age, nearly 30,000 people flocked to him from various parts of France. The Laon chronicler noted that the holy boy Stephen appeared as their master and leader. According to another source, the 13th century Barnwell Chronicle, written in England, The children had their sights set higher than holy war with Muslim Spain or the Cathars. They said they needed to go to the Holy Land and recover the true cross. Okay, very interesting. I'm just highlighting things that I think are interesting personally for me. This desire was prompted by a traumatic event that had taken place decades previously in 1187, when the Crusaders lost the relic of the true cross at the Battle of Hattin. Later that year, forces of the Ayyubid Sultan Saladin took Jerusalem. Philip II did not lend his support to Stephen or his followers. It is not clear from the sources whether he read the mysterious letters Stephen received. It is not clear from the sources whether he read the mysterious letters Stephen received, or indeed exactly what these letters said. However, the chronicler of Laon records that the king took the movement seriously enough to consult a learned group of churchmen known as the Paris Masters. His actions suggest the king was fearful of the likelihood that the presence of large numbers of poor young people might lead to civil unrest. The Laon scribe wrote that on their advice, the king commanded Stephen's followers to return to their homes. Stephen's crusade ended as quickly as it began. Okay. So Stephen, this young boy, tries to start a crusade, and it fails. The Laon Chronicle was written very soon after the events recounted. So many historians regard as credible his claim that following the royal order, Stephen's authority crumbled. Interest in Stephen and his followers later aroused more speculative accounts. These include authors such as Matthew Paris, an English Benedictine monk writing more than 20 years after the event. Matthew attributes Stephen's charisma to a dangerous satanic magic. Another chronicler, the Cistercian monk Alberic de Trois Fontaines, extends Stephen's story to a tragic end in which Stephen leads his followers to the Mediterranean port of Marseille, where they are tricked by two merchants who give them free passage aboard their 7 ships. 2 ships sink, and the 5 remaining take the children to Bougia, modern-day Béjaïa, Algeria, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and Alexandria, Egypt. The merchants sell the children to Muslim slavers, who then try to force them to renounce their Christianity. They remain faithful, and 18, according to Alberic, are tortured to death. One of the Pueri escapes and returns to Europe to give this testimony. Most historians consider Alberic's writings questionable. Alberic includes many of the same details as the Laon chronicler, but the events in Marseille and North Africa are not supported by any other sources of the era. Okay. Placing his account more in the realm of hearsay. So, might not be true because there aren't enough sources to really verify the story. Nicholas's miracle. In parallel with Stephen's doomed crusade, another venture was taking shape in Germany under the leadership of another charismatic youth, Nicholas of Cologne. So we've got these 2 stories here, very interesting, Stephen and Nicholas. Both young boys who want to make their own crusade. There is some confusion in the sources as to whether Stephen's crusade influenced Nicholas or if both movements arose spontaneously. It is clear, however, that Nicholas, like Stephen, believed he had received orders from God to travel to Jerusalem to recover the Holy Land. His followers reportedly numbered in the thousands and included men and women as well as the youth. They gathered in Cologne between Easter and Pentecost in 1212. Sources recorded that Nicholas and his followers carried T-shaped Tau crosses, later associated with the Franciscan monastic order associated with poverty and humility. The Tau emblem would also become associated with Nicholas. The remoteness of Jerusalem did not deter Nicholas. He claimed that upon reaching the shore, the sea would part for him as it did for Moses when he led the Hebrews out of Egypt. Contemporary written sources tracked the progress of Nicholas's Pueri as they moved toward the Mediterranean. On July 25th, 1212, their presence was registered in the city of Speyer in southwestern Germany. From Speyer, the Pueri marched south and crossed the Alps, an unimaginably difficult and dangerous route. Weakened by hunger, exposure, and fatigue, those who did not choose to return home or who did not die along the way arrived at Piacenza in northern Italy on August 12th, 2012. Okay, this is definitely wrong. This is what I did at the beginning of this article. I said 2012, and now they're doing it in the article. Pretty sure that's 1212, because 2012 was quite recent. So let's just change that here, and maybe I'll send a message to the editors of the magazine. 1212. It could be 1212, 1213. I'm not sure exactly. Let's just go back a little bit and look at the dates here. So I'm sorry I'm not just going through the article very cleanly. I'm kind of picking away at some things. Okay, one of my favorite things to do in Drawboard, if I have the function here, well, I'll just do white, is to just white out something. So I hope this is exciting for everyone. Watch me do some whiteout. Oh, great. There we go. Okay, and now let's see if we can overlay that text, or do we have to make a new one? Because it might go under. Oh, and it's not being selected. Oh, yes, this is another. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Okay, there we go. 20. Nope, it's not going to work. Because I put the text first, I have to delete it. And let's paste it. Now let's see if we can paste it over the whiteout. Ooh, okay. The computer is also not doing well because its memory, I think, is being used up too much with all this. So let's try this again. And that's not 1212. Okay. Okay. All right. It's not moving. There we go. Just a bit more. Oh, okay, that's way too much. All right. Okay, okay. All right. So there we go. Hopefully that looks okay. So they got to Italy in 1212. They had crossed the Alps, which is a very difficult thing to do. They had walked over 400 miles in a month from Piacenza, several thousand traveled almost 100 miles more to the port city of Genoa in Italy. Despite their prayers, the sea did not part, and the multitude disbanded. Nicholas's leadership seems to have ended, and his ultimate fate remains undetermined. Tales abound that some Pueri went by ship to Marseille, while others ended up in Rome. The ones who stayed in Genoa probably found work as a source of cheap labor, only lasting a few short months. Nicholas's crusade was recorded as a failure, begun with earnest passion and faith, and ending with exhaustion and disappointment. Despite not reaching the Holy Land, the Children's Crusade made an indelible mark on 13th century culture. More than 50 chroniclers recorded it. Some penned a few terse lines, while others devoted pages. Because the crusade was not sanctioned by the Pope, it is remarkable that both Stephen's and Nicholas's movements attracted attention that lasted for decades. One account from an Augustinian monastery in Alsace, written in 1230, describes Nicholas's 1212 venture as a certain vain expedition, which came to pass when pueri and foolish persons snatched up the sign of the cross without any discernment, motivated more by curiosity than concern for their salvation. Whether the purity were children or peasants or a mixture of the two, the hostility of some chroniclers toward them reflects the fear that piety carried too far by the young or by the poor would lead to a breakdown in authority. Such fears later came to pass in the form of the Shepherds' Crusade of 1251, led by an elderly Hungarian. It was linked at the time to the Children's Crusade, when the chronicler Matthew Paris claimed the leader was the now grizzled Stephen of 1212, almost certainly untrue. Despite such fears of unrest arising from popular crusades, later chronicles also exalt the Children's Crusade. The tale that many had been shipwrecked on San Pietro Island near Sardinia later prompted Pope Gregory IX to sponsor a church there. For all the troublesome nature of the Children's Crusade as it unfolded, the church soon held up the fervor of the Pueri as an example to emulate. As recruitment began in 1213 for a new crusade, the fifth, which eventually set out for the Holy Land in 1217, people were urged to follow the example of the children the year before and offer their lives for Christ. Historians may never be fully able to separate truth from rumor and fact from fiction, but the Children's Crusade provides valuable insight into the relationship between popular movements and the church. Historian Enrique Meseguer writes extensively on medieval history, specializing in the popular crusades. So there we go. Very interesting. Medieval history, modern myth history. Very interesting. We don't really know what's true and what's not, but I think a lot of us know that the Crusades happened and we kind of know the brief history of the Crusades. To know that there were these children's crusades is very interesting, and both of them, the two main ones, kind of failed, but then and the church didn't really they didn't sanction them, as it said in the article, but eventually they kind of used them to um, ignite fervor within people so that people would want to join the new crusades and do what these children had done, because it was so amazing that they were so young and they were so uh, motivated. So we'll look at some of the images here and then we'll finish up. Youth movement, Gustave Doré's 1877 engraving reflects a popular romanticized view of the 1212 Children's Crusade, while historians continue to investigate the true details. Opposite 13th century French processional cross. There we go. That's a cross that they would use in the processions in the church. That's from the 13th century. Okay. So it seems like there is some truth to this. We don't know exactly what happened, but there were these people called the pueri, and they could have been young people or they could have just been poor people, peasants, not mercenaries, not the typical people that were doing crusades at the time. With their flocks, shepherds listened to an angel announce Jesus' birth in a 12th century relief from the church of San Giovanni in Fonte, Verona, Italy. Many of the participants of the Children's Crusade were shepherds themselves. Okay, here we go. Nice picture. Inspiration. Construction of the Cathedral of Chartres, southwest of Paris, began in the 12th century. Many Europeans were inspired to join the Crusades after hearing sermons in the shadow of this magnificent edifice, and that is Chartres. Royal approval. Stephen of Cloyes led his followers to Paris in 1212 to seek an audience with King Philip II of France, depicted crowned and enthroned on a royal seal. So Stephen goes to Paris and wants to get approval from the king, and I guess the Pope as well, to do this crusade, but he was turned down. All right, King's Court. In 1212, Stephen and his young followers set out for the court of King Philip II, which was installed at the Abbey of Saint Denis, Paris. The great basilica is where, for hundreds of years, French sovereigns, including Philip II, were laid to rest. That's the Abbey of Saint Denis. Okay, questions of age. It has been argued that the so-called Children's Crusade was not strictly made up of children. In 1977, the Dutch historian Peter Rads argued that the Latin term pueri referred not only to those who were children, but also to those who were socially small. In other words, pueri could be peasants like Stephen and Nicholas, who belonged to the lowest echelon of society. Several sources specifically mentioned that adult men and women, as well as the elderly, did take part in the events of 1212. The term pueri could have been used to refer to male adolescents under 15 years of age, which was then the legal age to marry. This definition adds teenagers to the mix. However, the word infantes also appears in the sources describing participants in the crusade. This term does refer unequivocally to children. Okay, so maybe this is the French pronunciation. Enfant, I'm not sure. Appears in the sources describing participants in the crusade. It does refer unequivocally to children. Okay. So there we go. There are some children that are mentioned. Stephen of Cloyes leads the Pueri in a romanticized 19th century engraving. Okay, so there we go. It did kind of inspire a lot of lore, you could say. Faith and trade. The 13th century Spanish miniature above depicts a merchant ship. The 1212 Crusaders struck out for Mediterranean ports, hubs of European trade, and the exit point for pilgrims and official crusaders to the Holy Land. So they're trying to get to Jerusalem, which is very difficult. It is. So the 13th century castle of Castelsardo looms over the rugged northwestern coast of Sardinia. Accounts that followers of Stephen of Cloyes were shipwrecked near this Mediterranean island in 1212 are considered to be apocryphal. Apocryphal means probably not true. Probably a myth. Very beautiful place though. Beautiful, beautiful image. Gregory's Innocents. Alberic de Troisfontaines, a 13th century French monk, wrote a lengthy chronicle between 1227 and 1241 that featured an entry on the Children's Crusade. So we have a French monk here in the 1200s, but historians doubt its accuracy. He details the attempts of the Pueri to secure passage to Jerusalem when 30,000 of them reached Marseille. Swindled by slavers, many perished while their ships sank near Sardinia. According to Alberic, Pope Gregory IX was so moved by the event that he ordered a new church called the Church of the New Innocents to be erected on San Pietro, an island some 4 miles southwest of Sardinia, where the drowned children washed ashore. Alberic reported that their perfectly preserved bodies were carried into a local church where they remained and were visited by pilgrims. Historians have searched for remnants of this church, but both in ecclesiastical documents as well as archaeological sites, solid confirmation of its existence has yet to be confirmed. So this may not be true, like most of these things that we're reading. The Crusaders lost the relic of the True Cross at the Battle of Hattin. Saladin's capture of the True Cross in 1187 inspired the Children's Crusade. Okay, so that was a very important battle where they lost the True Cross. All right, parting the waters, Nicholas of Cologne believed the Mediterranean would open before him as the Red Sea did for Moses, as depicted in a 13th century miniature from the Bible of St. Louis, held in the Cathedral of Toledo, Spain. And next, Crusades and the tower center left of the 12th century Cathedral of San Lorenzo rises over the Mediterranean port of Genoa, Italy. Sources say the city was where Nicholas of Cologne's exhausted followers vainly waited for the waters to part and open a passage to the Holy Land. It's very sad. Very sad. They were just waiting there for the water to part. And it did not happen. And we've got a final infographic here and a little extra excerpt. Romantic legends. Accounts of the 1212 Children's Crusade feature dramatic events some that are now regarded as apocryphal. For centuries, romanticized retellings included these episodes, such as the story of the Crusades, an English children's book from 1910. Suddenly, while Pope Innocent was vainly trying to rouse Europe to undertake a sixth crusade, boy leaders drilled their little regiments and prepared seriously to go forth to the Holy War. At first, they met with opposition and ridicule, but such was the earnest zeal of these little people that even the most hardened onlooker ceased to jeer or hinder. Mothers with aching hearts saw their little ones march forth and put out no hand to prevent them. From Germany, a band of 7,000 children set out for the port of Genoa, from whence they hoped to embark for the Holy Land. They were led by a boy named Nicholas, who swayed them by the most extraordinary power. But to get to Genoa, they had to cross the Alps, and their cold and hunger, and there cold and hunger left thousands of the poor mites dead. The remnant made its way at length into Genoa. There they hoped to cross the sea, but the citizens of the port looked with scant favor upon the little crusaders. Enthusiasm was long since dead. They were laughed at as failures, and saddest of all, when they were asked why they had left their homes, they now made wary claims that they could not tell. Few indeed ever saw their native land again. Okay, Stephen of Cloyes. March here, his march, journey to Marseille, and subsequent shipwreck off Sardinia is likely to be an invention. We have a map here of France. So going down the Rhone River, Rhone Valley. This is interesting. There's actually a very nice bike route that I'm going to be doing starting tomorrow. Hopefully I can make it all the way to Avignon from around here, around Nice, that area in southern France. And there is the route does go along the river here all the way to Lyon and then to Geneva. It's called Eurovelo. It's very nice. Okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? Final thing. Nicholas of Cologne. Followers of Nicholas headed south along the Rhine River. Okay, so this is corroborated by historical records. So this is most probably true. Their goal is the Mediterranean, where they believe the waters will part. Many die crossing the Alps. On arrival in Genoa, the miracles fail to materialize and they disperse. Many remain living and working in Genoa. So that is very interesting. They do cross the Alps here, which would be incredible. And they end up in Genoa, waiting for the sea to part so that they can, I guess, go all the way down to Jerusalem, which is like way over here. And that did not happen. Documented movement, uncertain movement. Okay, so there we go. So that is it. And just for interest, the Catharism happened around here, Carcassonne. When I was looking at the map, it was kind of around this region of southern France, Carcassonne, Narbonne, the heretics that were also targeted by the Crusades. Okay, so that is it. That is a very interesting article, I guess, for people who like this type of history. I think there's some things we can take away from it. I think it's very interesting that we've got these two stories. We don't know the veracity of them, the real truth behind them, but they are very interesting stories about the Crusades and the Crusades undertaken by children, by young people, apparently. And they both failed. So not very uplifting, but at the end here we do see that the church may have used these stories to recruit people, urged people to follow the example of the children. So if the children are doing it, then why can't all the other people do it? We should look at them as being brave and noble, and we should follow them, and we should join the next crusade, because if these young people did it, then we can too. So it led to these popular movements that the church used to further the crusades. And it kind of reminds me of something I've been doing in class with some students. We've been looking at a book called All Quiet on the Western Front about war. And in the book, the boys are very young, they're teenagers, and they go to war. And it's a similar type of thing. They go to war with a lot of zeal and enthusiasm, and they really want to fight and do good things for their country. It's all about doing good things for their country. And all the other people are kind of cheering them on. The adults are encouraging them and everything. And of course, we know what happens to young people in situations like these where they go to war, especially World War I. What happened? Okay, so that's it. I'm going to end the live stream here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the uh, reading of this article. Please feel free to download it if you would like to get any more articles from National Geographic History. Let me know. I can send some more to you. I have a bunch of the magazines as digital files, and I'll try to be doing this next month as well in April.